Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan Vukpavlovich. I'm here with my good friend, Russell Firestone. And this is episode number 11, my sixth with Russell, of the Sophisticated Shut-In. Currently, there is a plan to ease some of the shelter-in-place orders starting in a few days. As far as when we are shooting this, this episode, and it's the 28th of April. This episode will air on May 7th. And hopefully there won't be, a major outbreak as a result of these easing regulations. Today, we are going to talk about suiting construction, mostly the jacket. We might touch on pants a little bit. What makes a suit jacket or a blazer or a sports coat have the shape that it does? And the three main ways to achieve that shape, or we should rather say two main ones, the cheap way and the good way. And then we'll talk about why the good way, the more expensive way, is so advantageous. And there are quite a few reasons for that. And then finally, we'll talk about how that construction varies traditionally according to style of tailoring, which can mostly be broken down by geography, with the caveat that in the last decade or two, or perhaps even longer, those lines, especially geographically speaking, have really, really blurred. And as tailoring becomes a little bit more, globalized, there's been a softening of those guidelines as far as, you used to be able to, say in New York City, where people come from all over the world, you used to be able to tell where someone was from by looking at their suit. That's really no longer the case, or less so the case. So we'll get into that as well. And now that choice in construction style is a sartorial preference, as opposed to, I live in London, therefore I'm going to go to my London guy on Savile Row and he's going to make me a British style suit, and that's that, right? If you happen to live in Rome, you had a Roman style suit. That's it. Now we have far more options, and indeed, for example, at Capra, some of our manufacturers of custom clothing pride themselves in being able to achieve just about any of the styles. You just tell them what kind of style you want, they'll make it. Others, even in the custom program, don't do that. They stick to a select style because that's their tradition. Like, for example, the company Hickey Freeman, which is just really the ubiquitous American business suit. They offer a couple of variations, slight variations on construction style, but really stick to that American business look. Whereas Adrian Jules or Trinity, which are two of our other custom manufacturers that we deal with, will literally do anything you want. So now it's more of a fun thing. And if you're interested in that kind of thing as a wearer, that's great, because you can work on that with your clothier, a person such as myself, to really either have me explain to you further these style differences, and we'll get into that in a moment, or you can read up on it yourself and look at pictures and look at videos and research it yourself, and tell me what you want. Or you can, if you don't care, you can leave it in my hands, and I'll put you into whatever I feel is suitable for your needs. If you need a fun wedding suit, it might be one thing. And if that suit will be worn only in the summer, whereas maybe you need a year-round business suit, which would be a completely other thing altogether. Okay, so first and foremost, we are going to start with the good and the bad way of constructing a suit. As I mentioned before, or maybe Russell mentioned it last time, you can these days walk into Macy's, for example, or even K&G Styles, or like some of these, entry-level stores for that kind of thing, suiting, and literally pick up a suit for $150. And the obvious element of that is that the fabric is going to be very cheap, most likely all polyester. It's going to look like crap. It's going to feel like crap to wear, as opposed to, say, a $2,000 suit or even a $700 suit, which is made out of a nice, at least all wool fabric, perhaps from one of the Biella region mills in Italy that is known for high quality fabrics. Most British mills will probably be a little bit too elevated as far as entry price point to offer a $700 suiting option. But I could be wrong about that, honestly. I just know that there are quite a few mills in the Biella region of Italy that make some beautiful entry-level fabrics. You can get some nice Super 130s, Super 150s, long staple fabrics, which are nice quality, and they may be relatively basic colors. They may be your basic blues, grays, etc. But it's going to be a nice quality fabric, and you can get a nice entry-level kind of $600-700 suit made out of it. So that's the obvious element. The less obvious element is actually twofold. One is the amount of handwork that is done on a suit. How long does it take to make this suit? Is it all hand-stitched? Is it all made on a machine? And the fact is that suits of this quality can't be made entirely on machine. There's always some element of handwork, and we'll get into that. And then, the other, that when you look at truly the cheap versus the lifetime garment, is it a fused construction or is it a canvased construction? And this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty. The good stuff is called canvased, and that is because it quite literally gains the structure of the chest piece and the shoulder mostly, but some other things as well, from horsehair or goat hair or both, canvas made out of these two materials largely, that is then hand sewn into the front panel of the coat in a way that it achieves a floating construction, meaning it's not stitched in so that it's immovable from the shell fabric, but indeed floats between the shell fabric, that is to say the actual outer fabric of the suit, and the lining on the inside. So therefore, a canvased garment will have 3 distinct layers in the chest. And that is one way to tell a canvased jacket from what we call a fused jacket. A fused jacket does something entirely different. It takes the padding or the canvassing, which probably won't be natural horsehair canvas. It'll be polyester or cotton if you're lucky. And they literally fuse, that is to say, glue it to the outer shell of the fabric. So then it becomes one layer with the main fabric, the outer fabric of the coat, so that that layer, along with the lining on the inside, are the only two layers. So if you take a coat and you grab the lining on the inside and you grab the shell fabric and pull it apart, if you can feel a third layer in between that, that means you have a fused suit. If, however, you grab that shell fabric and some stuff comes along with it, that means it's a fused garment. To illustrate, I've brought this home from Capra and Cavelli. This was once.
You might want to back up there.
Yeah.
I think you said the first thing you were talking about there. You may have said that just incorrectly. That you want to feel that pull apart. I mean, you want to feel that third layer. That would be the canvas garment. I think you said fused accidentally.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. So that if you feel that third layer between the shell and, thank you, between the shell and the lining, then that is a canvased garment, and that is what you want. That is the preferable high quality choice. If you don't feel it, if you grab that outer shell and some stuff comes along with it, you can feel something is attached to it and you can't pull it apart, then that's a fused garment and that's a low quality garment. And we'll get into why one is good and one is bad. But before that, I want to show you a canvas garment that has been defaced so that you can actually see the guts of it.
This whole topic, I think is great just in the fact that, to the untrained eye or just to somebody who's not real familiar with suiting, you can walk by a suit and you look at it and it looks at first glance almost like, every other suit. But what you're talking about, really determines whether or not you're buying a quality piece and whether or not you're going to want to wear it and how it's going to hold up through time. And so it's, in other words, you're going beyond just the initial appearance of what you're looking at.
That's absolutely right. Although it is tied into the appearance as well, which is something we'll get into later, but you're right. To the untrained eye, a cheap suit will always not look as nice as a nice suit, because even an entry-level all-wool quality mill fabric will look better than polyester to just about anyone right off the bat, But beyond that, you're right. You then have to develop a trained eye to see some of the minutiae that we're going to start getting into. Yes. So as you see on this side, this left side of the jacket, this is what a jacket looks like normally. This side has had the facing from the collar and the lapel and the lining on the inside removed. And I don't know how much you can really see, but you'll see these loose stitches. This is literally horsehair canvas, and I believe this is goat hair up here. It's a little bit sturdier and thicker for the collar, because the collar needs a sturdier shape than the soft roll of a lapel, that is stitched by hand to give it shape, okay? And then, depending on the construction type, which is what we're going to get into later, there may or may not be just a little bit of padding in both the chest piece, but mostly the shoulder, depending on the style of construction. And then you'll also have, depending on the shoulder style, which is something we're really going to get into, a little bit of canvassing in the sleeve to give it shape. And then you'll have lining in the sleeve. lining is very necessary, especially in the sleeves, but even an unlined jacket, you will have what's called a butterfly lining in the back, just so that, because putting on an unlined jacket over a shirt is horrible. You need that, smooth, slidey lining between the shirt and the wool, so that you're comfortable and your arm slides in and out as you move or as you put the jacket on and off. Now, you will notice also that this canvassing goes all the way from the collar up here to the very, very bottom of the front of the coat. And that is what we call a full canvas construction. And that is the quote unquote nice stuff, okay? Because that canvassing then helps the drape all the way down the front of the coat, which is especially important, if it's important, with lighter weight fabrics, right? Because heavy fabrics, if you're in like a tweed, it's arguable that you don't really need a full canvas coat, because the fabric is so heavy it drapes beautifully. So what do I mean by full canvas? The alternative to canvassing, to full canvas, is something called a half canvas. And it is an excellent way to cut costs but retain quality, because the top part of the coat, the lapel, the chest, everywhere it's important, everywhere you need that shape, is canvassed. But then from that first button, or between the first and second button down, they don't do canvassing, okay? Which is arguably far less important. All of, literally 98% or whatever of the benefits of canvassing are in the shoulder and the chest, okay? At this point, I'd maybe like to let Russell speak to his interpretation of why canvassing is superior to fusing, and we can go back and forth on that, and get into any element of it that you maybe think I didn't go into as deeply as I should have.
Okay. No, I think this topic is probably for somebody who's not, who's either they don't care much about clothing, or, they're just trying to get into tailored garments. It's one of the most confusing things, because very few places, when you go in, show you the inside of a coat. You just see a bunch of suits hanging. And if you don't know anything about how suits are constructed, they're all going to look the same to you, basically. Mm-hmm. But it's important to have an understanding of this, because, wherever you're buying clothes, you definitely, the more you understand about it, the more questions you can ask. And
I should also say there are plenty of places that sell this kind of clothing, and if you ask the salesperson, they won't know what you're talking about.
Oh, true. Yeah. That tells you too whether or not, maybe you're not in the right place. But it's definitely, there's personal experience of just walking into a men's clothing store. It was in another city, and, they had a bunch of sports coats and everything, just walking along, looking at them. And one of the salesmen came up, and of course, I started asking questions about the coats, how they were constructed. And, he's like, well, I said, are these canvas? And he's like, no, these are fused. So immediately, if you're more versed in, the construction of these coats, you'll know whether or not you should even buy that coat or not. It might look good at first, but if it's not constructed well, you're not going to want to keep it through the long haul.
So would you mind getting into just your angle on what makes a canvassed jacket preferable to a fused one?
The first thing is it's more comfortable. I mean, both just putting the garment on, and I mean, the best way to experience this is to literally try on a fused coat and then try on a canvas coat, and you can feel the difference. It's just more comfortable to wear. I mean, just the feeling of putting the coat on. But as you're wearing it, too, the canvas coat, especially if you live like here in Austin in a warm climate, is going to be much more comfortable to wear throughout the day because it regulates your body temperature.
Well, it's breathable. Yeah.
It's breathable. So
that canvas is a very loose weave. Canvas is a very loose weave.
Right.
Therefore, air passes through it very, very easily. Yeah.
Yeah. Versus the fused is much hotter to wear. I mean, it's not regulating your temperature. It's going to be hotter, and arguably in a cold environment, you're going to get colder as well because it just doesn't regulate because it's unnatural. Versus like with the canvas garment, first of all, anything that's canvassed, the actual fabric that the suit's made out of is going to be a higher quality because nobody's going
no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of money in the fabric if they're not investing any money in the construction of the garment. So by having all natural fibers from wool to the horsehair canvassing and everything, those natural fibers are just more breathable and they regulate temperature better. And the other main thing is just when you own the garment, through time, that the canvassing will slowly start to conform to your body shape. It will take on the shape of your body better and better the more you wear it. So that this is a garment you're going to want to keep, and on top of it, you're going to look better and better in it the more you wear it.
That's right. That canvassing shapes its drape over your chest over time. It learns the shape of your chest.
That's it. Versus the fused is just, it's kind of whatever it is when you buy it, that's it.
More or less, yeah.
It holds together. Mm-hmm. Plus, it's just, that's the other main thing. Whenever you're dealing with a canvas garment, like you were saying, I mean, there's going to be way more just actual tailoring skills involved in the construction of it. The fused garment is trying to make it to where it's just a factory run, to where there's very little need for actual tailoring skills. They just glue it together.
To speak to that, a typical bespoke, meaning the highest level of hand tailoring suit, whether it's done in Savile Row or in one of the finer tailor shops in Italy or France or elsewhere, takes 60 to 80 hours of people using their hands to sew your garment together. The typical fused suit takes about 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's definitely just trying to crank out suits for an uneducated buyer is what it is. I mean, just somebody, and maybe if you're the type of person who, I don't know, I mean, you just don't care about the quality, or more than likely, if you understand this topic better, you're not going to want to buy a fused suit.
No.
I mean, because it's just, you're wasting money is what you're doing. It's kind of the old adage that it's never thrifty to be cheap or to buy low quality.
No, that's true. The one type of instance where I could maybe see it is that, maybe a 15-year-old kid has an event that they'll need a suit for, and they likely won't need another suit for another 3 or 5 years.
And they'll outgrow the one.
And they'll outgrow the one. In that kind of situation, I can see justifying doing something like that, Yeah. But that's about it.
Sure. But you'll sweat way more in a fused garment.
And
generally, that's where you'll get the impression. Most people have the impression that tailored clothing is uncomfortable.
Because they wear crappy tailored clothing. Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I thought I would mention is because of the moisture wicking tendencies of that canvas, this is something that we touched on in our Care for Tailored Clothing episode. is that at the end of the day, it will naturally wick away your perspiration, taking all the odors with it. And that is how you can actually get dozens and dozens of wears out of a high quality canvas suit between dry cleanings, therefore just increasing its longevity by a massive factor.
Oh, sure. I think, one of the questions, is there a hybrid garment out there, or like to where both canvassing and fusing are used? Or
it happens less and less. It used to be that most half canvas suiting would use some kind of fusing on the way down from that point, between the first and second buttonhole. That happens less and less because more and more manufacturers have learned that with a nice sewing construction, from that point on, it's okay if you just do fabric on fabric and you indeed don't have any structuring there whatsoever. It's just two pieces of wool, or wool with lining on the other end. So as half canvassing has gotten more sophisticated, there's been less and less of a fusing element to it. In fact, I can't think of a single manufacturer that we deal with, Capra and Cavelli, that fuses the bottom half of their half canvas jackets. And I should say this is far, far less common, but there is such a thing as a 3/4 canvas where it goes down to under that second buttonhole. It's a nice option. And I should say that two of the brands of jacketing that we deal with at Capra use a 3/4 canvas construction. One is a Canadian company called Blue Jacket, and the other one is our own house brand of off-the-rack jackets. So if you see a Capra by Design jacket hanging on the rack, it is likely a 3/4 canvas. For our Capra by Design custom, we always go full canvas. So if you're getting a custom garment from us, you can be rest assured that it is a full canvas construction. But then some of the stuff we sell off the rack is full canvas, some of it is half canvas, and a little bit of it is 3/4 canvas.
No. But that's one nice thing to know. I mean, you want to know, honestly, I mean, I get, every market's different, and, some businesses have to do what they have to do, but if walking into a store that they don't even go down to fused garments, that's a good sign. I mean, because then that you don't have to worry. Anything you see in the store, if you like it, it's going to be a quality garment. It's not, you don't have to worry that it's kind of a lottery, that if you pick this jacket over that one, you might be buying a low quality.
The way you're absolutely right. And if you walk into a store that not only deals with canvas only garments, but doesn't deal with fashion brands, but indeed just deals with style brands, you know that anything that you buy in that store is going to be a good value for your money, whether you're buying a $700 suit or a $3,000 suit or a $5,000 suit or anything in that range, anything. It will be quality proportionate for the amount of money that you're spending.
Yeah.
Very good.
Since we're, I don't know if you were getting ready to go on. I was going to say, you might want to talk about the amount of handwork that goes into the different.
Okay. So excellent question. If a jacket is canvassed, that means that there's some amount of handwork in it, because you can't put canvassing in on a sewing machine. It has to be hand sewn. There's no such thing as a machine that puts in canvassing. But at the very least, most manufacturers will at least hit a few of the other elements by hand. Not necessarily all. Like, to be honest, there's very little handwork in our entry-level suits, the suits that we sell at Capra for $600 or $700. The canvassing is done by hand. The armhole is probably reinforced by hand, and that may be about it. Okay. Then there are some manufacturers like that we deal with, and others, but I can only really speak to the brands that I know. And this is, we're dealing with your high quality mid-level suits in the $900 to $1,200 range. We're talking brands like Byron. We're talking brands like Jack Victor out of Canada. I'm wearing a Byron coat. I realize that we didn't talk about what we're wearing. We'll get to that when we get ready to talk about shoulder style, so I can kind of explain. Those will do the shoulder expression by hand, all of this, the entire armhole, all of the pick stitching, which is really just like, an affectation, but it's a sign of a high quality suit. And, a lot of the stress points are better done by hand because you can vary the density of the stitching, whereas a machine always does the same stitches per centimeter or whatever. When you do it by hand, you can really shape a garment much, much better. And then, when you get to a point of about $2,000 or so in a style brand as opposed to a fashion brand, you start getting garments that are, more than half hand sewn. We're talking Paul Zilleri, Hickey Freeman, Corneliani, as far as brands that we carry at Capra. These are mostly hand sewn garments. And then if you go to for example, Savile Row in London, or some of the finer people in Italy, France, or some true artisans here in stateside, you are getting an entirely hand-sewn garment. In fact, I believe on Savile Row, the only allowance for a machine, which some tailors don't even allow themselves to do, are the 4 straight seams on a trouser. Right? But everything else is done by hand, which is why it takes 60 to 80 hours. So it's that handwork that really, really ups the quality and oftentimes longevity of a suit, because every single stitch is done with purpose and oftentimes with hundreds of years of legacy behind it, why it's placed the way it is, This is the stuff that's taught from generation to generation. So, having said all that, that canvassing style gives away a lot about a suit, meaning different tailoring styles historically, usually divvied by region. There's the British style, the American style, the French style. And then the Italians honestly have always kind of been masters of just about any style. And sometimes, according to the region of Italy itself, they'll have different styles, right? You can tell a lot about a suit and how it's worn. And it used to be in global metropolis places like say New York City a few decades ago, you could tell where a man was from by his suit, because you'd be like, oh, you're probably a Brit because that's clearly a Savile Row suit, right? Or you're a Southern Italian because that's clearly a Spalla Camicia, and we'll get into that. It's no longer really the case. Indeed, even some of the Savile Row tailors have relaxed those boundaries, if you will, And there's a massive cross-pollination now, and everyone borrows from everyone else. In fact, Russell, we were talking a while ago about how of the Savile Row tailors, we really kind of like the style of Anderson Shepherd. And Anderson Shepherd is arguably the least Savile Row-like tailor on Savile Row, right? Because they actually use more of like a American shoulder construction than the true British one, you know? And so with that, I'd like to get into our next topic, which is how are these canvassing styles, the way that canvassing style is used and in the shoulder, how do they affect a suit style as far as which region originally influenced it? Okay. So I am wearing, this is, and this speaks of that cross-pollination. This is a jacket, it's just a sport coat, made by an American company called Byron. And they are out of Kansas City. But they concentrate on British style, okay? So even though some of their pieces actually are more of a Southern Italian kind of cut, most of their stuff is British style. And you can always tell by three main kinds of shoulder expression. And the British shoulder is typically what we call a straight shoulder. It just goes straight from the collar, neck, across the shoulder, and then goes down, into the sleeve. There's nothing super fancy going on around here. It has structure because a British jacket, typically, as opposed to an American jacket, will have a fair amount of padding and will actually have a lot of structure in the chest and the shoulder, but once it gets to that shoulder seam, it just has a straight, natural kind of slope. And this is perfectly indicative of that kind of shoulder, even though this is a very lightweight summer jacket that has only a single layer of canvassing and no padding, okay? So in that regard, it has a little bit of Southern Italian or even American in it, okay? Because of that padding, even though it's nothing fancy is going on here, the Brits like a strong shoulder, and then they cinch in the waist a little bit to kind of give you that classic kind of V shape that is associated with British style, as opposed to the American style, which will have less padding, especially if we're talking about your Ivy style and trad staples. We're talking the sack suit, Brooks Brothers, Hickey Freeman, that American Ivy look is going to have far less padding. They go for a softer shoulder. They might indeed not even have a dart in the front of the jacket because it is a straight cut. It does not try and achieve a shape. It's a more relaxed look made for, Americans tend to have fuller bodies than Europeans. I don't know if that's entirely true, but on average, it might be.
I think that's that. I mean, the main reason that got developed was because that will fit more body types than any other.
Of course. Absolutely. Yep. So that's the British shoulder and the American shoulder. However, the Brits traditionally put more padding in there and do contour the waist, whereas Americans have far less padding and don't contour the waist. That's no longer true. In fact, very few people make a true American sack suit anymore. Okay, I mean, Brooks still does, and Hickey does, but we certainly don't carry it in our store. That waist suppression is really the order of the day, even if you don't need it right? Now that deviates from the Northern Italian and French shoulder style, okay? Italy uses many styles really according to the region of Italy. A Northern Italian suit is going to historically look different from a Southern Italian suit, like a Neapolitan, which will differ from a Roman style suit, which is the third thing altogether. Now, obviously, it's all over the place and people do whatever they want, but traditionally, it kind of was like that. So the Northern Italy and France, the Parisian suit, which is really geographically the same region, typically favored the very high structure of what we call a roped shoulder. So that's going to have a fair amount of padding, because these are sometimes colder climates than southern Italy, right? And then instead of just going down on the shoulder seam here would be raised up by sometimes as much as, a 1/4 inch if it was really extreme, almost as if a rope were inserted into it, even though this was achieved with canvassing. So that it went up a little bit before it went down. And that gave a really kind of regal almost look, And the Italians tended to favor either a single-breasted peak lapel suit or a double-breasted, and they would either do 6-on-2 or 6-on-1. What does that mean? A typical double-breasted coat, or the most common, I should say, has 6 visible buttons in the front. On a 6x2, the top 2 aren't what we call active buttons. It is the bottom 2 on the right side that button. So that's a 6-on-2 double-breasted. And then some Italians would also do a little more of a relaxed double-breasted look, where they do a 6-on-1 so that the V goes all the way down to that bottom row of buttons and gives it a much longer, sleeker, and more relaxed look. And ultimately, that is what Italians are always trying to achieve: the relaxed look versus the stuffiness of the British, right? In most sartorial pursuits, it's usually at the end of the day the Brits versus the Italians, right? And the Italians are always looking for a way to deviate from the Brits, though to be fair, that's also a function of climate. And then there's the French, or the Parisian specifically style. A Parisian style encompasses many things, and they can make all sorts of different kinds of jackets, but the essential Parisian style is a double-breasted 6-on-1 jacket, but they actually raise those bottom 2 rows of buttons so that even though it's a 6-on-1, the crossover point is a bit higher than the Italians. And that's how the French distinguish themselves. They give a 6-on-1 a little bit more formal of a look. So roped shoulder and a lot of double-breasted. And then finally, then I should kind of throw in there the Romans, who are kind of like a tertiary thing. They just do pretty much a regular kind of British American style shoulder, but with a lot less padding and a lot more instances of double-breasted. They're kind of an outlier because Rome is in southern Italy, but they have more in common with Northern Italian and French tailoring than they do with typical Southern Italian tailoring. And that's probably because Rome is a major metropolitan area, and those areas tend to be a little bit more formal than smaller rural, areas. So then finally, we have the typical Southern Italian tailoring, which is completely pad-free. If there's canvassing in there whatsoever, it's going to be a simple single layer of canvassing. They've also pioneered the totally unstructured canvas-less tailoring, which is probably the hardest thing to pull off because you don't have canvassing to aid you in making that shape. So your pattern, the way you cut, the way you sew things together, the way you steam things has to be absolutely impeccable. And when you put on a garment of this quality, like San Andrea is a perfect manufacturer for this style, it's literally like putting on a second shirt. It is nearly weightless. You don't feel it on. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous thing. And that, one of the distinguishing shoulder features is something that they call spalla camicia, which literally translates into shirt sleeve. And that is when the seam, instead of coming together on the inside and just letting drape over naturally with a little bit of canvassing in there, there's no canvassing, especially on the sleeve side. Okay, and it is inserted into the sleeve, into the armhole like one would on a shirt. And that gives a totally sloping, natural look. There's absolutely no roping, no structure there whatsoever. Okay, so you really got to get it right on the shoulder, which is why it really should be a custom thing. Because if that thing, with structure in there, if the shoulder is a little too wide for you, it's okay. That canvassing and padding will keep it straight, so it just looks like you have slightly wider shoulders. With a true spalla camicia, there's no such thing, right? You got to get it right on that natural end of the shoulder, otherwise it's going to hang down here on you, which is a horrible look, right? And one of the defining features of a true spalla camicia is something called shirring. And that is a true artisan who does this, and it's usually done by a very high-level tailor, will achieve a very particular kind of look by taking a sleeve that is cut to be a little bit too large for the armhole circumference. So it will actually slightly pucker and pleat towards the top. So it won't be a totally smooth seam, and it's going to just kind of, pucker here, which to a lot of people looks like it's a low quality garment, but nothing could be further from the truth. It gives you more arm motion, a little bit more nonchalance, and in order to really achieve it elegantly, one has to be an absolute master at the craft. So it's that puckering, or you can call it pleating. It's not true pleating, because pleating is very, very, defined and often pressed and all of that. Spalla camicia is just kind of they just kind of push the shirt in there in a very kind of nonchalant but elegant way. And when you see that, that suit probably cost $5,000. So those are the main styles. There are different styles as well. Germans got their own thing, but those are really the four main ones, or even I would say the three main ones, with a nod to our Parisian friends, for the innovation of that higher 6-on-1 double breast button stance.
One thing I'll say, especially about the shoulder construction or design, some people, that makes a big difference. I mean, for a lot of it, it can be personal preference. Just what do you like a certain construction better than others? But for some people, just depending on your head shape and size, how much padding goes into that shoulder can make a big difference in how you look.
Oh, for sure.
If you're somebody who just happens to have a pretty sizable head, and you don't have any padding in that shoulder, the proportions can look off. That actually putting more padding into the shoulder can help balance the proportion between the jacket shoulders and your head. And that's how all of this, what we're talking about, the construction and the way the jacket is designed, can help you look better when you're wearing the clothes than when you're not.
Absolutely true. Yep.
And another thing is some people, quite a few people actually, their shoulders, they don't even know it, are not even.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, I mean, that my shoulders are pretty straight. I mean, they're pretty even. So I don't really have this issue, but some people do. Their shoulders are uneven.
Yeah.
And that's where sometimes if it's pretty pronounced, in a custom garment, you can correct that by adding more padding so that whenever you put the jacket on, your shoulders to other people when they're looking at you are evened out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something like, you'll have to go custom to get that, but that's where, these little features and how the jackets are built can really change your appearance and make you look a lot better.
That's true. If I may jump in, it's not entirely true that that's a custom only option. In fact, the benefit of custom often is if you have slightly deviating shoulder slopes that isn't egregious, then the benefit of custom is actually the exact opposite, that we can actually shape the two shoulders slightly differently so you can have the same amount of padding, but they both fit you nicely. Now, in the cases of where it's really kind of extreme, then yes, you're absolutely right. We would actually put more padding into one shoulder than the other to kind of even you out a bit. But to say that that's a custom only option isn't exactly true. You can take an off the rack suit and add, or in some cases even subtract padding from one side to even it out. And that with someone with super narrow sloping shoulders, that's sometimes the best way to do it, is just put in additional padding to kind of lift them up off of the shoulders. Yeah.
Yeah, my own personal experience on this is, I've got clothes from a long, going back a long time in my life, but I have some jackets that have a lot more padding in them than I would probably buy today. And one thing I notice, especially over time, as I went from having hair to having a shaved head, is no hair on my head really actually makes my head a lot smaller. And that's where by actually putting less padding or having less padding in the jackets, I feel like now I look better in it because it's more proportional. And that's like what we've talked about a while back. That's the whole key to all of this, is if you get the proportions right for your body, you're going to look right, no matter what time period you're in. But fashion will, sometimes they want you to appear, having built out shoulders, kind of give you a Superman type look. But that's the fashion. And that's where, if that's not right for you, you can come back to it 10 years later and you look at yourself like, oh my God, what was I wearing? Yeah.
So I will say that both of us have quite even shoulders, and they're not sloping or square. They're very regular shaped. So a lot of off the rack stuff in theory will fit us both well. However, I have very, very narrow shoulders for my chest width. And indeed my head size, right? Probably a couple of sizes down in the shoulder from my chest. So that is why when I very rarely buy things off the rack, and I only buy occasional sports coats off the rack. I don't buy suits off the rack. I don't buy blazers off the rack. It's really just sports coats. I need a little bit of structure in there because my natural shoulder actually ends probably a good, I would say 3/8, a half inch in from where the shoulder ends. And some people actually like that. I know that you, Russell, like a slightly wider shoulder anyway. Mm-hmm. But I really need it because otherwise this would just droop right down and wouldn't look right, And then because of that, on my custom clothing, suits, blazers, or other sports coats, I actually do specify a slightly wider point-to-point than I normally would. And I'm talking like my shirt yoke, point to point, right, is 17 1/4 inches. So on my suit jackets, I add a 1/4 inch. That is to say, an 1/8 inch on each side, just to kind of build me out a little bit to make me appear more proportional. And I should say that with my fully unconstructed, spalla camicia seersucker, I went ahead and just put it right on my shoulder. And I really love that jacket, and I love the way that I look in it, but it's probably not a style I really should do because it kind of accentuates my puny shoulders. That is to say, draws attention to the fact that I have narrow shoulders. It's something that I always like the way that unconstructed stuff feels to wear, but I've largely avoided because of that issue. But in this particular case, I said, why not? And I'll probably do it again with some other garments, even though it's wrong for my body shape.
I guess I'll just ask you a couple questions that people might be curious about. Is there, would you say, well, first of all, is it possible to have like a half line jacket with a full canvas?
Yes.
Yeah.
What will happen? I have one by Byron, and it's a beautiful Zegna fabric. So the front panels will be lined to, cover that canvassing, but the back will be unlined, except for like just the butterfly in the back and the shoulders.
Okay. And that was the other thing, is that are there any times that you would say having a half canvas garment might be advantageous for somebody versus a full canvas? If
I think it's such a non-issue, like, put it this way. In my lifestyle, I can't think of a time when, if I had the choice between one garment or the other, and the only difference being half versus full canvas, I wouldn't go for full, because why not? However, in a truly unstructured garment, there is no canvassing, right? And that is actually a very, very desirable thing in some instances. So I'll do even one better. I can think of instances where you don't want any canvas at all, right? But I could see with some, we're talking, your 15 to 18 ounce tweeds. Maybe you wouldn't want that bottom canvas, because when you sit down, maybe you don't want it to feel like a piece of armor that has to bend. And I don't know, honestly, in that case, because I don't wear a lot of tweed. I have one Donegal tweed sports coat that I wear once or twice a year because this is Austin. And it's half canvas. It's a Byron, like it's the same brand. And I love it. I wish I could wear it more. But, generally speaking, in most situations, other than those outliers, generally speaking, I'll go for a full canvas over a half canvas option as a matter of course.
Yeah. I think it's, I would agree that it's, if you can, buy the best that you can afford. Yeah. If you can get a full canvas and you can afford it, you should go that route.
And also bear in mind that, like, for example, one of our manufacturers of custom clothing offers us the option of either going fused, half canvas, and full canvas, right? Obviously, we never do fused, right? Some of the other clothiers, once in a very great while, in order to save a little bit of money for their client who just might not have a lot of money and it really makes a difference to them, will make you a half canvas custom garment. However, I've never done it because, say on a, $1,800 suit, the price difference is $75, right? Or, I mean, I'm just kind of pulling that out of my, what, but to me, it's a negligible difference. And usually the question is, if the subject is broached whatsoever, the client will be like, hey, is this half canvas or full canvas? And I say, full canvas. We always do full canvas in our custom. That's really, when I hear it, most people don't even know. They have no idea. They're there because they trust us, right? To know this stuff because they don't want to know about it. But I have seen it once in a very great while that maybe somebody is getting an entry-level custom sports coat, and maybe it costs $1,000 full canvas and $925 half canvas. And to them, the fit of custom is really, really important. But the actual bottom half of the canvassing, they'd rather save the $75. Again, I've never encountered that with a client, but I know it has happened.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's that full canvas. I mean, if you get that in a jacket, I mean, it's just going to look better and better on you the longer you wear it.
That's right.
I mean, the half canvas is still going to look better.
Oh, yeah. No, they're both excellent options. They really are.
Yeah. On kind of a little bit lighter, I mean, I don't know if we want to go into it this time. Do we want to talk about shirt construction at all this time?
No. Let's get into. Well, that's a whole other can of worms. We'll be here for another 2 hours, but that is an excellent topic to get into. And speaking of excellent topics, unless something happens otherwise where Charlotte decides that she's not into it, which is okay, next time I would like to do something a little bit different, and that is bring in Ms. Charlotte Simpson, right? Is it Simpson? Yeah. Who is Russell's partner and just a phenomenal person with an impeccable sense of style herself and a lot of insight into many, many things, one of them being men's style. And I thought well, actually, I didn't think this at all. It was her idea, to give credit where it's due. But I agreed. I thought that her idea of having her come on and talk about, first of all, what is to her generally appealing in menswear, and then maybe talk specifically about some of your favorite look, or her favorite looks on you that you have as part of your wardrobe. So if she is into that, I would be incredibly excited to have her. And what I would ask also is that maybe, so that it's not this nebulous thing, you could actually put a couple of these outfits together so you can actually show us, right?
Sure.
You could maybe wear one of them, but then with others, you could just throw up combinations of whatever it is, suits or trousers and jackets and shirts, or whatever it is that she decides is worthy of talking about.
Oh, sure.
Well, all right. Anything else before we sign off?
I'll just warn everybody that Charlotte's half British, so that might follow her one way or the other.
And I don't know if I should mention this. I don't think she'd mind, but this made a huge impression on me simply because of the enormous impact that this band had on my life. But her dad, which is the British half, was a roadie for Black Sabbath, and Black Sabbath is, I don't know. Many of you probably don't know. There's no reason you should. In my past life, I was for 20 years, a professional musician and record producer, engineer, touring musician, all that kind of stuff. And Black Sabbath was absolutely one of my beacons of light and major influences. So that's really, really cool as well. All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. And thank you, everyone, for putting up with us once again. We'll see you next time.
All right.